Hey, it's Dave here, and in this video I'm going to introduce you to four different testing techniques to look at your digestive health. And the great thing about these tests is that you can do them all at home. You don't need to go anywhere to do these tests, right? You can just have the test kit sent to your home. You complete whatever sample you need to complete. You send it back to the lab. It's as easy as that. So no embarrassing trips to the doctor, no embarrassing need to urinate at the specific time when you're at the doctor's clinic and provide the sample there and then, or any of that stuff. This can all be done in very private and confidential circumstances. So what are these four tests and why are they helpful? First of all, I'm going to do whole video series on stool testing, organic acid testing, etc. So we're just going to do a high-level overview of the tests that are available to you, and then there'll be links to the video series for each individual type of test beneath this video window, so you can explore them in a lot more detail and get a feel for what they are, how they can help you, and which one might be most relevant for you. So let's begin with the stool test. Most people have heard of the idea that you can provide a stool sample and that stool sample can be analysed to see what's going on in your digestive system. Trouble is, in the medical system, the stool testing services are a little bit limited. They only focus on a very small number of things when they look at the sample, whereas the private labs tend to look at a vast array of different factors in the stool sample that are not considered within the medical system. And so the stool test will look for pathogenic bacteria, parasites, and viruses. Pathogen means disease-causing, so these are organisms that we know can cause problems in the digestive system. It will check for H pylori. Some of the tests look for the specific strain or subtype of H pylori that you might have, and they also look at antibiotic resistance within those H pylori organisms as well, to see whether you have an antibiotic resistant strain. And of course the advantage of that is that you can then guide your treatment with your doctor and use antibiotics that those H pylori organisms are not resistant to, and that's hugely important. You also get to see whether you have an overgrowth of what we call opportunistic bacteria. These are bacteria that are not generally considered as digestive troublemakers in the medical setting. So it's things like Klebsiella, Staphylococcus, Streptococcus, and things like that are kind of in a grey zone. They can definitely cause problems elsewhere in the body, but they haven't really been so much linked to issues within the digestive system. You also get an idea of what's going on in terms of whether you have optimal diversity and quantities of friendly bacteria as well, things like Bifidobacter, Lactobacillus, Bacteroides, and things like that. And that can be helpful because you might have a microbiome deficiency. You might just be really low in the friendly microbes that you actually need. And again, that's not considered in the medical system. You also get to see whether you have yeast and fungal overgrowth, Candida, Geotrichum, other types of yeast and fungal organisms that can actually overgrow in the digestive system. There's a whole bunch of parasites that are assessed, tiny microscopic parasites like Dientamoeba fragilis, Blastocystis hominis, you've got Giardia, Cryptosporidium and things. And you also have worms as well, tapeworm, hookworm and what have you. They're all included in the stool testing from various laboratories. Now, what I also like about the stool test is that they give you some really good information about how your digestive system is functioning. So it's not just about whether you have too many bad bugs and not enough good bugs living in there. It's also, are you digesting your food properly? How strong is your immune system? Is your pancreas kicking out enough enzymes to help you break down your food? Are you digesting fats properly? And also, what kind of levels of inflammation do you have? All of those pieces of information are extremely helpful in guiding the program to get you to where you want to be from where you are now. So that's the stool test as a brief overview. Organic acids is an interesting one. You may or may not have heard of organic acids testing. Organic acids test is basically a urine test. And you might think, well, how the hell can a urine test tell me what's going on with my digestive system? And the reason is all the blood that leaves your digestive system ultimately goes to the liver and ends up with the kidneys, and you're excreting a whole bunch of stuff in from your kidneys and out into the urine. And some of the organic acids that are in the urine are actually metabolic footprints of what's going on in the digestive system. So there are certain chemicals in the urine, when they build up, they can indicate that you have mold overgrowth in your digestive tract, or they can indicate that you have candida or other yeast and fungal overgrowth, or bacterial overgrowth as well. It doesn't necessarily tell you what specific type of overgrowth in the bacterial and yeast fungal areas that you have, but it shows you on a broad level that that's something that is going on. But it does have to be interpreted carefully, because some of those markers can actually be caused by other factors as well. And so you need to kind of mix the organic acids test in with a really detailed analysis of symptoms, lifestyle, diet, nutrition, and things like that as well. But the organic acids test can be really, really helpful. Sometimes it finds things that the stool test can miss. The next test is called a lactulose breath test. And lactulose is a type of sugar, and you drink a little lactulose solution, and then what you do is you measure your breath, or you take breath samples every 20 minutes for 3 hours. And then what the lab does is it looks at different types of gas in the breath. It looks at methane and hydrogen. And if those methane and hydrogen levels show certain patterns over time, that can tell you, or certainly be very, very indicative, that you might have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO. And that's a really common problem. About 60% to 70% of people with irritable bowel syndrome seem to have SIBO, which then begs the question, do you really have irritable bowel syndrome, or do you actually have SIBO, right? That's really important. So the lactulose breath test, it takes a little bit longer than these tests, because these are just single samples. But this one takes about 3 hours to complete. So you need to just make sure you put a morning aside for that. But it can be very, very helpful, because the stool and organic acids test can't tell you for sure whether you have SIBO or not. They can be indicative if the bacterial markers in the urine are elevated, or if you have certain opportunistic bacteria in the stool, then you can get an inference that SIBO is there, but it really needs to be confirmed with the breath test. And then finally, we've got the Lactulose Mannitol test. This is another urine test, and this is a test for what we call leaky gut. This idea that when our digestive system is really irritated and inflamed, that the little gaps between the cells within the intestine open up, and they allow things to leak into the bloodstream that would not normally enter the bloodstream. And then our immune system attacks those chemicals or molecules that have leaked into the bloodstream, or they float around the body and interfere with neurological function, energy production, hormonal balance, and things like that, and just make us feel generally terrible. What you do with this one, you drink lactulose mannitol solution, so you knock that back, and then again you test your urine. And the idea is that the lactulose, if the GI tract is nice and healthy, if there's no leakage, if you like, if the permeability is shut down and everything's working normally, then the lactulose level should be negligible in the urine, because that's a much bigger molecule and it shouldn't get through the intestinal barrier. The mannitol is a smaller molecule and it leaks through the intestinal barrier even when the intestinal barrier is not damaged. So you're going to have mannitol in the urine when you take the sample anyway. But if you have lots of lactulose in the urine sample, it means that those larger molecules are somehow getting through into your bloodstream and then are having to be processed by the body and then leave the body in the urine. And that would give you an indication that you have this increased intestinal permeability or leaky gut. Now, there's a marker, a relatively new marker in some of the lab's stool testing called zonulin. And zonulin is another marker that you can use to assess whether you have this increased intestinal permeability. So you can add zonulin to the stool test and it will kind of negate the need almost to use the lactulose mannitol test. But they're all useful. Now the problem with the tests is not one of these single tests is perfect, right? So they're all great in their own right, but they're not 100% perfect. So really, what I feel is a helpful guideline. There are a couple of things you can do. Number one, arrange an initial consultation and a health history review with a practitioner who can help figure out which of these tests is going to be most relevant for you. And you'll be interested and surprised to know that your symptoms, your pattern of symptoms, when they occur, how they developed in the first place, can really guide which test is going to be the most useful. Or you can kind of just put your best foot forward, if you like, and just do one of the tests. I'm a little bit biased, but I honestly think that the stool test is probably the best starting point, because even though you can't tell whether there is a SIBO problem with a stool test, you can infer that there might be a problem if some of these opportunistic bacteria levels are elevated. And if they are, then you can always do a breath test to confirm exactly what's going on regarding SIBO thereafter. So I like to do the stool test first with people. I like to add zonulin if people's symptoms are very severe, or if they have things like autoimmune conditions and general discomfort and symptomatology in the body as well as the digestive system. But I hope that's helpful. As I said right at the start, what we're going to do is unpack each of these tests and describe them in a little bit more detail so you understand them more in separate video series for each test. If you want to begin the investigation, if you want to really start to dig in and figure out what's going on, there's some links beneath the video window to learn more about how to book a consultation and a case review, and also how to get information and possibly even order one of these tests as well. So I hope it's helpful. I will talk to you on the next video where we'll look at unpacking all of these different tests. Thank you.